if we had sustained the momentum of Apollo. And by the 1980s, we would have had a permanent base on the moon, and we would have been on Mars. Just, you go back and look at the extraordinary trajectory. So I want to start, and because I used to be a history teacher, I want to put this in context, because what I'm going to talk to you about today is going to be very, very bold. And it's going to be very different. And it's going to make, frankly, some of the NASA bureaucracy uncomfortable. And you're going to meet people in Washington who are going to say, oh my gosh, what if you were actually just flying rather than studying? What if you were actually just getting things done instead of having planning meetings? I mean, it would be a frightening change in the current pattern. So let me put it in context. I'm going to use 3 examples, the third of which is obvious, and that's John F. Kennedy. The first, though, is Abraham Lincoln. Abraham Lincoln in 1859 stands on the banks of the Missouri River at Council Bluffs, Iowa, and says, we should build a transcontinental railroad. Now, at the time that he says this, we do not have the steel-making capacity to build the rails to get to California. And we do not have an engine powerful enough to get across the Sierra Nevadas. In 1869, the railroad is completed. Second, the Wright Brothers. This is my core critique of NASA, and frankly of all government science in its current form, with the possible exception of DARPA. In late 19th century, people were sort of right at the edge of flight. They kind of almost knew how to do it. They almost had the right engines. They were all looking at birds. And there were 2 parallel American projects that are fascinating. The Smithsonian, arguably at that time the greatest scientific institution in the country, had a $50,000 grant from Congress to learn how to fly. And the Smithsonian had very smart scientists, and they had connections to the best scientists in Germany, and the best technicians, and the best metallurgists, so they could order a really cool engine. Meanwhile, in Dayton, Ohio, there were 2 brothers who ran a bicycle shop. Now, bicycles in the 1890s were a high-end technology. They actually merited a discussion in the census report of 1890 on the fact that bicycles were widespread. They were allowing teenagers to escape from their parents. And there were many sociological side effects of this new revolution. So the Wright brothers are here, and in their spare time, they're fascinated with flight. They actually build a wind tunnel. These are not unsophisticated people. They build a wind tunnel, they study birds. They go to the U.S. government for important weather information. Where is the most continuous updraft in the United States? Kitty Hawk, North Carolina. Comes off the ocean, comes up the hill. So the Wright brothers, for several years, go down to Kitty Hawk every summer, and they take a lot of wood. Now, the reason they take a lot of wood is they know something very profound. They don't know how to fly. It may seem obvious, but trust me, most government planners don't get this. So what do the Wright brothers do? They get up in the morning, they have built a very light plane with a very weak engine. And it's going to start at the top of the hill, it's going to go downhill, it's going to have an updraft, and it crashes. They average 6 or 7 crashes a day. And they stop, they fix it, they think about it, talk about it, have some more coffee, and they try it again. This goes on for several years. Finally, in December of 1903, they have the first powered flight in history. One brother runs alongside the plane to make sure it doesn't flip over. It doesn't fly fast enough to get ahead of it. The entire first flight is shorter than the wingspan of a Boeing 747. And it never gets high enough to go to the fuselage of a 747. Small article in AP. That's December 7, 1903. In 1907, they've made enough progress that they fly around the island of Manhattan, and 1.5 million people see an airplane for the first time. 4 years. Because they figured out the core thing, which is how to fly. Now, by contrast, the Smithsonian being a large government establishment of great prestige with too much money, orders from Germany a really cool engine. Now, there's a problem with a really cool engine. It's heavy. And if you have a heavy engine, you have to build a heavy plane. And if you have a heavy engine and a heavy plane and you're a Washington bureaucrat, you don't want to go to Kitty Hawk, which was nowhere. The Kitty Hawk was so isolated, these guys are living in a tent. And so you say, well, how am I going to get wind? And you invent something which we still use today, a catapult on a boat, the precursor of the modern aircraft carrier. And you put it in the Potomac, because you're going to launch it off a boat, because you're smart, and you have a theoretical study. And you invite the Navy to come and watch your very first test. You all probably know where this is going. So, they get out there in the morning, the mist comes off the river, they launch the plane, and it goes straight into the rock. Now, here's the problem. When you have a plane land on ground, it's fairly easy to recover it. When you have a plane that is heavier than water land in the Potomac River, it goes down, the current tears it up, and you have no idea what was wrong. It's a one-time perfection problem. Now, the Smithsonian is deeply embarrassed because they look like fools. And then they get this Associated Press report that 2 bicycle mechanics have flown. The Smithsonian hostility to the Wright Brothers was so great that the Wright Brothers would not give them the original airplane for 37 years. Because bureaucracies hate things that aren't invented in the bureaucracy. There may be a lesson here for people in NASA and the Air Force. Okay? I'm coming around here. Bear with me. For example, May 1961. And this is the model for what I'm about to talk to you about. May 1961. John F. Kennedy, representing a new generation, having taken power from Dwight David Eisenhower, launching a new sense of a new frontier, announces to the Congress, we will go to the moon before the end of the day. We did a movie called City Upon a Hill, and we have Buzz Aldrin in the movie. And he is so convincing, he said, you have to realize, the only person who had gone around the Earth at that point was Yuri Gagarin of Russia. And the only American who had been in space had been in a suborbital flight. And here's the president saying, we will get to the moon inside this decade. And you had to invent everything. We had all sorts of precursors. We had the V2, and we had this, and we had that. The truth was, if you listed every problem they solved by July of 1969, it's one of the great periods of development in human history. And they just did it. So, and I'm giving you this background for our friends in the news media, because twice recently Governor Romney has made fun of me for having bold ideas in space. And I suggested that, the idea of going up a permanent lunar colony, he actually didn't catch the weirdest thing I've ever done, I'm going to tell you all, because sooner or later his researcher will find it. At one point early in my career, I introduced the Northwest Ordinance for space. And I said when we got, I think the number is 13,000. When we have 13,000 Americans living on the moon, they can petition to become a state. And here's the difference between romantics and so-called practical people. I wanted every young American to say to themselves, I could be one of those 13,000. I could be a pioneer. I need to study science and math and engineering. I need to learn how to be a technician. I can be part of building a bigger, better future. I can actually go out and live the future looking at the solar system and being part of a generation of courageous people who do something big and bold and heroic. And I will, as president, encourage the introduction of the Northwest Ordinance for Space to put a marker down that we want Americans to think boldly about the future, and we want Americans to go out and study hard and work hard, and together we're going to unleash the American people to rebuild the country we love. So, I'm going to give you a set of goals, and then I'm going to make a set of observations about how to achieve those goals. By the end of my second term, we will have the first permanent base on the moon, and it will be American. We will have commercial, near-Earth activities that include science, tourism, and manufacturing, and are designed to create a robust industry precisely on the model of the development of the airlines in the 1930s, because it is in our interest to acquire so much experience in space that we clearly have a capacity that the Chinese and the Russians will never come anywhere close to matching. By the end of 2020, we will have the first continuous propulsion system in space capable of getting to Mars in a remarkably short time, because I am sick of being told we have to be timid, and I'm sick of being told we have to be limited to technologies that are 50 years old. Now if we break down all the bureaucratic barriers and we go to what I'm going to call a common sense model. If it's cheaper, faster, it works, do it. Second, we need to learn how to do 5 or 8 launches a day, not 1. We need to get in a habit of saying, you know, this is going to be like an airport. We're going to be so busy. I mean, if we're going to get to the moon permanently and we're going to start getting to Mars, we're going to build this near-Earth capability and do it all within 8 years, we better start thinking more like airports than like space systems. We've got to start figuring out, okay, so how are we going to manage this many things? It's not that we can't do it, it's just we don't push ourselves, we don't think about it, we don't design the systems for it. But I want constant activity. I want something, there's a reason. The World War II generation built tons of airplanes, so the designers that came out of World War II had made lots of mistakes. And they learned from them. If you're a military aircraft designer today, you're lucky if you work on more than 1 airplane in your lifetime. That's how slow and cumbersome and bureaucratic it is. You don't have any learning curve. I want us to have so much constant, energetic, excited activities that people are running again. And then we're drawing the best talent in the country right back to the Space Coast because it's exciting and it's dynamic. And who knows what next week is going to be like. And does that mean I'm a visionary? You betcha. Yeah. I was attacked the other night for being grandiose. I just want you to know. Lincoln standing at Council Bluffs was grandiose. The Wright Brothers going down to Kitty Hawk was grandiose. John F. Kennedy standing there saying we'll get to the moon in 8 years was grandiose. I accept the charge that I am an American, and Americans are instinctively grandiose.